All right, everyone, welcome back to another live stream. I'm your host, Ruan Marino, and I'm really enjoying doing these live streams because I don't have to prepare and I can just say what I feel and show you cool things on my screen. So, what I'm going to be talking about today is the best way if you're running a local digital marketing business and you work with local service-based clients, how to get more customers. And I have found that there is a specific science to this of how to get 3 to 5 customers per month, but then most importantly, how to manage that when you're in the hundreds, which is where we're currently at. So right now, this is not theory for us, right? If you look up develomark.com, that's our agency. So we're located in Connecticut and we have 90% of our business is local to us. And that's on purpose. And so you don't need to scale with chaos. That's something that you don't need to do. And a lot of people think that agencies aren't scalable, service businesses aren't scalable. It's different to grow them. And they buy all of these systems and they buy all of these strategies from other people when in reality, you're creating your own unique strategy. And so that's what I wish to share with you today is my unique strategy. And I'm going to show you the technical, I'm going to show you the strategic, I'm going to show you my opinions, I'm going to show you what's worked for me, what hasn't worked for me. And you should take this and really adjust it to be your strategy, right? Because it's your destiny, it's your future, it's your business model you're creating. You're not a franchise, right? You're not a franchisee. You can't just buy somebody's advice and then do exactly what they did. You're creating your own path. So I'm going to show you what's worked for me. And hopefully you can take that and turn it into inspiration for you to create what you want out of your business. So what you're going to walk away with today is a clear offer, a clear pricing model, what to do, what not to do, what to offer, what not to offer, and an inside look at my sales process. And I just want to be very clear, guys, that I'm not trying to be facetious when I talk about sales. Like, this is not some magician thing that I'm going to show you some advanced NLP tactics to trick the customer and get them to say yes and then get their credit card. This is going to be just genuinely being a good human being. And when you can just genuinely be a good human being to other people, you can scale. But there is a methodology to this. It's not random. It's not guesswork. Many times people think that in advertising and digital marketing, you're taking a gamble. So every time you take on a client or you sell a deal, if you feel like you're rolling a dice, you're doing it the wrong way. So hopefully today I can give you some predictability. So let's get started on the first part of the conversation, which is how to have a real sales conversation. So here we go. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and then we'll get into it. So the first step here is really understanding the process of this entire thing. So if you guys have noticed on my little process here, on my little board, I have 4 steps. Now, most people do 2 steps. Most people will do a call where they get information from the customer and then a call where they close the customer. And I have found that that is a very low conversion rate thing to do unless you have extreme authority in the business. Now, our company, Develomark, as you can see right here, all of these customers are local. And so a lot of the businesses that we work with, we have a privilege to actually go to them and get their business in person. And I have found that the power of the handshake, the power of actually approaching the business locally has done a significant value add to our business just in general. So that's our niche per se. Now, to some of you, your niche might be to verticalize. To some of you, your niche might be a certain service to offer. For Develomark, what we've chosen, what's worked for us is to physically go to these businesses. You guys got to remember, you're living in a world where everybody's sitting behind a computer screen. So when you can physically go to your customer, you're going to get a lot of success for this. Now, for me, that doesn't mean going to trade shows across the country and going to these different roofing events and these different dental events. There's nothing that makes me want to kill myself more than doing that. I would prefer to build relationships in my local marketplace. I hate traveling for business. It's something that I despise doing. I can get on a live stream, reach thousands of people without having to go anywhere. I prefer to grow my business with peace of mind. And so for some people, though, that really works. And some people really like doing that. It's just not for me. So for us, it's really about getting to these local customers. And so what I found is this is the strategy that works really well. For example, we just had a lead come in today. And so our first step is going to be to really get on a phone and understand what that customer is looking for. At this point, what I'm really trying to figure out is what is that customer's goal? And many times their goal is going to be 2 or 3 things. One of them is going to be to get leads. Of course, they want to grow their business. And so that goal is to get more leads. Now, at this point, the average salesperson is going to make everything about financial. And they're going to talk about what does getting more leads mean and how much do they want, et cetera, things along those lines. And it becomes a little bit more transactional. When I'm trying to figure out the goal from the customer, I'm trying to figure out why that's their goal. Why do you want to grow? What happens if you don't grow? Why is now the right time? I try to ask these more deep spiritual questions as to why right now is the right time for them. And I try to understand what's at risk for them. Let's ponder that for just a second. If you don't reach your goal, what is there to lose? Loss aversion, which is a psychological bias, tells us that the human brain thinks about loss a lot more than the human brain thinks about gain. For some people, they're thinking about loss every day. They're thinking about their health, they're thinking about their wealth, they're thinking about their relationships, they're thinking about what they said if that was something stupid. And so when we think about loss aversion, we always think about what is there to lose. So I think about the goal and I also think about the risk. And I try to cater all of my conversations based on this. And really the risk is what's there to lose. And when you know loss aversion really well, you can start to think about, well, what is there to lose? If the goal in this case, let's say it is to get more leads, get more customers, etc. If the goal is to grow 15% year over year, right? Okay, don't ask the customer what's to gain at that point. Get an understanding of what happens if they don't get that. And you want to realize that there's nothing facetious about this. What you're trying to do is you're trying to help them come to a realization. If you're going to be seen as the consultant, you're going to have to ask these difficult questions. For me, that difficult question happens when I first meet them. That difficult question gets more difficult as I'm going to show you in the entire process. But if I'm going to build a long-term relationship with a customer, I need to know at a deep level more information about them. And that's why I have all these different conversation and touch points with them, which we're going to talk about. So when I really think about risk, I think about they want to grow year over year. Well, why? And typically what I'll hear is we hired more, we have great staff, right? So they'll tell us that they have amazing staff that they don't want to lose, and they want to sell their business, right? Most people are going to be around this area. Now, as you guys start to work with your own customers, you're going to realize that people have a lot of other whys, but these are typically the whys that I'll hear. The typical things will be, we want to grow this year because we have more people, we have great staff, and we want to sell our business at the end of the day. Automatically, by understanding that, you now know what you're working towards. If you don't know what you're working towards, you're never going to be successful because the customer's never going to be happy. So from there, I know what I'm benchmarking against. Now, if I'm selling and I'm in this conversation, whoa, what a responsibility I have as somebody that's going to do digital marketing for you. So you're putting me responsible of potentially helping you grow 15% year over year. That's not a small ask. I'm being responsible for you not having to lay off the technicians, the doctors, the employees, the front staff, the hospitality staff, whatever it may be. I'm being responsible for you keeping them and growing in your career path. Do you sense the importance of this, Mr. Customer? And you've chosen me to do this for you. I'm honored. At the same time, why is it the right time to do this? And I try to figure out what sparked their interest in their life to have this conversation with somebody. So automatically from there, I start to really understand why it's the right time for them. And typically speaking, you're going to see a bunch of different scenarios. Someone's looking to sell their business, someone's looking to grow, etc. But let's think about loss aversion for just a second. So we now know the goal. If we think about what's at risk, I'm going to say at risk instead of loss. What is at risk? Well, if you don't grow, you shrink. If you shrink, you have to make layoffs. If you're in business, if you've ever fired somebody, you probably hate doing layoffs. It is not something anybody looks forward to. If you're a real leader, you've done it multiple times. And I'm telling you right now, it does not matter how long you've been doing it. It never gets better. So we try to avoid that as much as possible. Well, what else? Your competitor grows. You don't want that. The value of your company shrinks. Okay. Let's go even deeper. Okay. You may have relationship issues because you can't afford more things. It's a huge embarrassment to your ego. There's an ego hit that you're not growing. And of course, it impacts motivation, which impacts a wide range of things. I'll get really deep about this conversation when I'm working with a customer because I need to know what's at risk. If they say nothing, it doesn't matter if I grow or not. I just need a website. That's usually a good time for you to just stop the conversation and say, this is not the right time for us, guys. If there's nothing at risk, if you don't know what you want, I can never make you happy. Because as you'll see, when we start to actually onboard and delegate to the client, delegate to our teams, the core message the team needs to know is what does the client want and what's at risk. Every conversation we have goes back to that. And so I'm going to frame you correctly to set up contracts with your customers. Now, a lot of you are thinking, I have this personal buddy-buddy relationship with my client and they don't need contracts. That's just stupid. Because if you think about it, you're in a relationship with somebody and you get married. Why get married? You don't need contracts. You need the contract because you want to take it to the next level with them. So you need something written down that you guys can sit down and have an expectations meeting with. When the founding fathers started America, they didn't go, we don't need a constitution. No, you need to know what you agreed upon. And I refresh that every single year with customers as much as I can. So let's get back to the actual content here. So now that I understand this phone call, which typically will be about 15 minutes, doesn't need to be anything really long, and I can sense that there's a strong why with the customer, then I'll take it to the next step. For this case, it would be the actual discovery. Now, during the discovery, if most possible, I try to do this discovery in person or on Zoom if I'm doing this remotely. The reason for that is because if I'm in person, there is a really strong power of touching somebody. Now, I don't want to make that sound sexual, but basically, if you hug or touch somebody, the trust and instinct you're going to feel in the chemistry is going to tell you yes or no. This is going to work or it's not going to work. And throughout the sales process, as you guys will see, I'm actually trying to convince myself and they out of the relationship. And if we can get past that process, I know it's going to be a good relationship. Before I even get to the data, I'm trying to see if the chemistry is going to be good. And so if we get through all of this chemistry, then I know it's going to be a client for life. And guys, I'm going for clients for life. I'm not going for these small little transactions. I'm going for the monthly retainer over the next 15 years until they sell their company. And then they have to fire me. One of my clients said very smartly the other day, she said, I hire people to fire me. I want them to do so well, they don't need me anymore. So you're basically doing a reverse funnel. You're starting them to fire you, right? And so if I can do that, I've done my job well. Clients aren't going to stay with you forever. That just doesn't exist. Nothing is forever. Everything is impermanent. So I'll make sure that when I do this, I'm trying to do that in person as much as possible. My goal in person is to get deeper on their operations. So I'm trying to figure out a couple of key things inside of their operations. One is, who are the people that we're going to be working with? If you guys have realized, a lot of the marketing materials that I preach is about adding people to your entire marketing. There was a website that we made recently. There's no people on the website. It's not going to convert. When you look at EEG machines, these little bands that they put on your brain to really understand the brain waves of how people react to visual images, when you don't see a person, you're basically dead. It's like you're a dead person. You'll read copy and it'll spike a little bit. The moment a human being is introduced, you're stimulated. So I need to understand the people of the operation because that's ultimately who's going to make up that operation. Now, a lot of the times, clients aren't going to want to be on photo and video, but that's just a non-negotiable for us because they're hiring us for the scientific advertising process. They're not hiring us to feel good. They're hiring us because they want a 15% year-over-year growth. Remember, if you look at one of your clients that you're working with right now and you can't answer why they hired you, you can't go back to that goal and what's at risk. The relationship is diminishing. So I really try to focus in on the operation. From there, I focus in on the services. What exactly are we trying to grow year over year? And I look at year over year because that's the best way to measure I have found. Seasonality tells me I can't measure based on the season because most businesses will do this, right? And so if you try to measure by the month per se, let's say I was measuring this month and this was the next month and they're all high because, oh my God, we're killing it month over month. And then you're like, hey, this month we had negative 15%. That doesn't make any sense because you're dealing with seasonality. And so I'm looking at in every relationship year over year growth. That's why I do yearly contracts. Now we're going to get into the terms and conditions of the yearly contracts in just a second. I don't want to be Mr. Lawyer. That's not my job. But my job is to understand what you expect of me and what I sold you. There has to be a piece of paper that we can go back to look at that. So our team can understand that too. So that's why we look at year over year growth as much as possible, right? So once I understand the operation, the people, the services, I then like to do a walkthrough at their business, right? Here's the reality, guys. I don't know what to tell you. This is just the truth. And if you don't like hearing it, it is what it is. I know you want to sit behind a computer and make a bunch of money. I know you want to just take that money, invest it in crypto, do nothing, and become a billionaire. Well, guess what? That's not going to happen. You have to do the hard work. And so, what I like to do at this point is I like to walk through their business and I like to gain the buy in from their team. Here's the deal: 50% of what you do is technical, 50% of what you do is spiritual. It's, do people like you? If they do, they're going to be more okay when you ask for them to send you access to their Google Analytics, to their Google business profile, to their YouTube profile, to their Yelp listing, to their TikTok account. If they don't like you, right, they're going to say, I don't like this person. I don't want to cooperate. And I'm going to show you exactly how this looks right now. When someone sees your name, they see it in two ways. They see name. For most of you, you're not feeling anything when you're seeing name, right? Then they see a name they like. For me, if I see the name Ruan, I get stimulated because that's my name. And then they see a name that they don't like. In this case, let's say it's Hitler. How do you feel when you look at these three names? 1, you feel nothing. 2, you're stimulated. 3, you feel very negatively. You guys have got to understand that the brain is being stimulated when your name is being mentioned. When you see a brand's name, there is stimulation going on. In these types of stimulations, there is neutral, meaning you are literally having no effect at all, which is probably worse than having a bad effect, to be honest with you. This is actually the worst thing that you can do in marketing, is have no effect at all. And then there is the one that's positive and the one that's negative. So for every single customer that I work with, I try to really make sure that the relationship stays positive by doing a walkthrough, meeting their team, shaking hands. Even if I'm never going to work with that person, I just want to make sure that when Ruan Manprin Marinho gets mentioned at the Thanksgiving dinner table at the client's house, it's being mentioned in a positive way. Because then when I ask for more money, or when I tell them to spend more money on ads, or when I tell them we're coming to do a photo shoot, or when I send a gift, or when they see my ads, or when they see my name, it's a positive reaction because clients are going to talk to you everywhere they go. So that's a little bit about that, of why I would do that, some of that walkthrough as well. Then when I do this meeting, I typically try to understand as much as possible deeper down into the challenges of why they're not there, right? So if we're not growing by 15%, if that's our goal, well, I need to understand why you're not on the path to get there. And many times, the reason for that is because they're working with somebody who just can't get them there, because they're either not bought in spiritually or they're not getting the services that they need to get it done. Most of the times, this is somebody not having the balls to tell them what to do. It's somebody that is asking them what they want. Let me tell you something. The dumbest question you can ask a customer is, what kind of sites do you like? What logos have you seen that really have inspired you? Or things along those lines, where you're asking them and you're making the customer do the work. What's your budget? That's the dumbest question of all. How much money would you like to spend here? Don't be transactional. Don't make it so they have to work to give you the answer. Do the work on the technical side to give them the recommendation. Let them pick and execute. Many times what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to get into a relationship with the customer where I don't even have to ask. I can just execute because they trust me. That's the level that you want to get at, but that's not going to happen until they trust you as much as possible. So typically during this point too, I'm taking a lot of notes and then I'm creating a My GPT. And what this My GPT is going to allow me to do is it's going to allow me to reference the entire conversation as we proceed within the direct sales process, right? After this meeting, what I'm trying to do is, my goal, my selfish goal, is I want to schedule the next meeting. Okay? Schedule the next meeting. That is the good case scenario. The bad case scenario is you disqualify the lead. Now, I want to talk about this just a little bit before we get technical. If the good case scenario is schedule the next meeting, that means we survived the conversation together. When I'm in the discovery meeting, I'm challenging the customer if I can. And any good consultant is going to challenge you on why you're not there yet. And so if someone says this and this, I'm going to ask why. And then I'm going to say, why didn't you take this approach? And what I'm doing during that discovery process is I'm trying to figure out why they haven't already done it yet. Or I'm trying to figure out if what I can do will actually help them. And if I find that there's too many things that will just conflict, that will typically be a part in the discovery where they may not be a good customer. Because for you to scale and actually get the customers that you care about, it's going to be about proper customer selection. The moment you start taking some bad apples, you create a cancer within your culture. And that's not what you want, because a customer can bring you up as much as they can bring you down. So the selection of that is absolutely critical. If you want to retain talent, you're going to have to make sure that client selection is at an utmost high. And for that reason being, you need to be selfish of understanding which accounts you want to take. You're in business for yourself, guys. You're not in business for anybody else. So you've got to really think about what your personal benefit is of taking on the account. During the discovery process, I'll try to figure out if I'm going to schedule the next meeting or disqualify the lead. And I'll typically figure that out by asking really challenging questions. Why they haven't gotten there yet? What's stopping them from getting there yet? Why didn't they make certain decisions? Because this allows me to get into the psyche of that person's mind. This meeting will typically last about an hour. Okay? Now, from there, if I have a good discovery process with this customer, what I'll do is I'll do another discovery process as well. In between this time, okay, if there is a positive meeting, if the goal was set to schedule the next meeting, I'll send a gift. Now, for those of you that are familiar with the book Giftology, I highly recommend that you read it, because I want you to realize that when you're talking to a customer and it's gone well, typically by this point, I will know if this is going to be a good customer for me. Now, if you charge $2,500 a month, whatever it may be, whatever your pricing package is, you'll know that getting a customer can be extremely lucrative to your agency long term. So what I'll do in this process is I will do giftology. And that means I'll spend a pretty penny on a gift. If in this case, it might be $500 to $1,000, depending on the actual customer and what they value and what they like, or it would be something a little bit more inexpensive. Generally speaking, by this meeting, I know if that's going to be a customer that's going to sign up for services or not. Most of the times, a lot of science has shown that people will determine if they're going to do business with you within the first 10 seconds of talking to you. It just has to come down to the actual technical specifics, which we're going to talk a lot about. However, in this case, by the time I meet with the customer, I've given them a thoughtful gift. Now, this isn't like some Amazon gift card, right? That's not thoughtful. Typically, it's a thoughtful gift that has their logo on it or something along their business lines. If you haven't gotten introduced to gifting, I highly recommend that you read this book. John Rowland, who's the actual author, talks a lot about the art and science of using gifts and why it works. And so at this point, if you're going to get an account, which should excite you, you should be sending them a gift. So then I do another visit. Now, my excuse for this meeting is to basically tell the customers I've reviewed the notes from the first meeting and have additional questions. Okay? You're basically auditing these people. All right? Now, in the additional questions, what you're trying to do here is you're trying to talk yourself and them out of the working relationship. I know this sounds ass backwards, so let me explain this before you guys say, what the hell is he talking about? So in this process, what you're doing is you're trying to make sure that you understand your conditions with working with the customer, and you're trying to understand their conditions with working with the customer. Unfortunately, 2 meetings is just not enough, because a lot of the things are unspoken. If you've spent 2 hours talking to somebody, are you just going to jump into a relationship with them? Probably not, right? And so at this point, at the 3rd meeting, I'm taking in what they said at the 2nd meeting. I'm digesting it, typically doing some short form of meditation, reading through the notes, and then genuinely coming up with questions and using AI to also come up with those questions as well. At this time, you may have questions about why it potentially will not work. And I'm not going to phrase it that way when I talk to the customer. All I'm going to do is I'm going to ask more challenging questions. I found that the more we can flesh this information out before we enter a mutual relationship, the more I can tell them what I want out of the relationship, the more they could tell me what they want out of the relationship. When we land, we're in a good place because everything is understood. Nothing is a surprise, right? And so you've got to do this for yourself to protect yourself and to protect your business. The easiest way for you to lose clients is if this is not understood. The easiest way for your team to quit, the easiest way for you to hate your life in digital marketing is for the expectations to not be aligned. So I like to make that very clear when I start the working relationship. Now, when I do this, I'm asking them questions about potentially why it wouldn't work. And that is a little bit of reverse psychology for us to really understand if this is going to be long term or not. Because at this phase, what I am trying to do is I'm trying to figure out two things. One, my goal is to figure out if this is going to be long term. Here's the deal, guys. You're already doing the work to get the customer. You might as well get the customer that's going to be maximum value. Now, I want to just say something to you guys really quick. There's two types of maximum value that you can have when working with a customer, right? There's two models. One is high upfront projects. So this could be something that costs somebody $50,000. Maybe there's two payments, and that's lucrative. The second one, which is my model, is low monthly, long-term projects. So this would be 46 payments over the term of 4 years, and I'm betting on retention to keep that customer over that time period. That's what I do. If the project is not going to be one of these two, I immediately don't think it's going to be a good project for the agency. So I'm expecting to work with this person for a long period of time. Think about that for a second. Would you spend $500 to get 46 monthly payments or $50,000 from a customer? Probably. And this is where you need to understand what your ideal customer acquisition is. Most businesses that can spend the most money to get a customer is going to win in the marketplace. Now, this comes down to a philosophical thing, guys. If you're greedy and you have all these fancy things, you have all these fancy cars, fancy house, big freaking watch, nice jewelry, all these things, you're not going to be able to play this game well. Somebody's going to kill you. Somebody's going to be able to acquire a customer for much more expensive than you are. They're going to win in the marketplace. If that's not your goal, I can understand that. However, most businesses are caught up in their attachments. They're caught up in their belongings. And a lot of the times you've got to work around that because what's at risk? Well, you're paying a mortgage. What's at risk? Well, I have to make my car payment. I like to go on the boat on the weekend. Real winners keep their attachments extremely low. Now, it's exciting when you start making a ton of money to start doing that kind of stuff. And trust me, I've been there. I've done that, and it's never worked well. So going back to the basics, you're really trying to make sure that you're understanding that you as the agency owner or as the freelancer need to live a little bit more frugally because it's going to allow you to say no to the customer. You don't need this money. If you're going to take that money, if the conditions are correct, so your close ratio is going to go down and you're going to be okay with that because when you do get an account, you waited for that account, you had patience for that account, and it's the correct conditions that you want it to be. Okay? Want to make that very clear. Your negotiating power in an agreement is the ability to say no. Okay? If you're just saying yes, you're consuming, you're taking in non-intentionally. I want you to be as intentional with this business as if you were landing a plane every single moment. And if you can't be as intentional as if you were landing a plane, don't do it. It's not going to be good for your growth. For you to grow, you need healthy oxygen, healthy soil, good water. You can't do it with a bunch of intoxicated things. So if you can't come to an agreement at the third discovery meeting and the customer, you can't talk, you tried to talk them out of it, but they're still ready to go, that's when you get into the presentation meeting of when you're going to propose what you're going to sell them and what's going to work for their business, okay? So that's what I'll typically do in that moment. And that is ultimately defined by getting these high upfront projects or these low monthly long-term projects because it's the same amount of work and you can only take so many clients at once. So you're better off taking the clients that are going to make the most sense for the brand, okay? Just wanted to make that very clear. So let's talk about the next step, which is going to be asking for the business. Now, I didn't put closing here because that word is a little bit like, objective. And I put that in the thumbnail just because. But in this case, you're going to want to ask for the business the correct way. The correct way is, I'm going to show you the correct way, and then I'm going to show you the wrong way. I'm just going to compare and contrast them just a little bit so you guys can see what that looks like. Let's start with the correct way. The correct way is to, one, outline the contract. In my case, it's 12 months. And I'm going to break that down to you guys of how that works. The second one is reiterate their goals. Everything that you're doing is focused on this client's 15% growth. You want to provide projections of what they can expect by paying your company money and advertising for them. Discuss your value ladder up front. So this means getting them into an introductory package and then giving them options to increase that in the near future. We're going to talk about how we accomplish that with the contracts that we're talking about now. And then the other one is you want to lead with data. Ideally, unbiased data that's fact checked, it's proven, and that is focused on scientific processes rather than people's general opinions. Okay? The incorrect way of doing this is, I'm going to put incorrect here. No contract. You are month to month. Okay? Bad idea. And I'm going to talk about why. Now, again, for us, that's just a choice that we have made. It's just how businesses do business. If you're month to month and you're seeing success, again, this is just what I'm doing. Some people do this very well. One of my friends is killing it doing it this route, and that's the business model he set up. Whatever's going to work for you. So I'm just telling you what's working for me. Number two, instead of focusing on their goals, you're getting technical. You're doing SEO history, terms, things along those lines. You're trying to sound smart. No one cares how smart you are. They care if you can get them results. Number three is you are avoiding the difficult questions. Okay? These questions, by the way, are typically questions such as, I'll tell you right now, can you offer guarantee, timelines, results? What do you think the results are going to be? If you're avoiding these questions, you're not doing this correctly. And I'm going to show you exactly how to do it very quickly. The fourth one is you're agreeing to never change your pricing up front. This is probably the one that I see that's the most dangerous. Is you'll see people that are doing this that haven't changed their pricing or haven't recommitted a customer in decades or years. If you're talking to them up front, you can adjust your pricing if they know it's coming. And I'm going to talk to you about how I do that, right? When I show you the screen of how we actually do this technically, right? But if you're setting the standard of the relationship that you're just month to month, when you tell them to increase the price, dude, forget it. They're going to be pissed. So when you objectively do it the way I'm going to show you, you can give them a value ladder, and that value ladder is going to basically get them to increase their amount they're paying from the beginning. Very, very critical. Very, very critical. And then the last one is you're leading with data like rankings. So instead of leading with like good marketing data, you're presenting them with rankings and you're getting technical with their opportunity. Like, for example, if you rank number one, if we run social, if you're talking about these kinds of things in the beginning, it's going to be very difficult to gain their trust because they don't really care about that. They just want to grow 15%. And you're going to talk about this when you actually go through your presentation. So these are the two correct ways, or one correct way to doing it, and then incorrect way of doing it. So correct, you can see on the left side here, that's what I recommend. And then on the right side, which is the incorrect, this is what you don't want to do. Okay. And it goes a lot deeper than this. I'm not going to get into why this is the correct and incorrect way of doing this. However, I do just want to let you know that I've thought about this a lot. And so that's when you're going to ask for the business. Now, the way that you're going to ask for the business is you're going to focus on a couple of key things for this business or brand. Number one is you're going to focus on what their ad budget is going to be. You're going to make their website. That's absolutely critical. There's no negotiation around that. We have to make your website. And I'm going to tell you guys why in just a second. You're going to do photos and videos. That's a non-negotiable. We just have to do that. You're going to do Google. You're going to do Meta. And you're going to do retargeting. That's a non-negotiable. Okay. I don't know if that's spelt wrong or let's do retargeting like that. And then the final one is we're going to have regular meetings to review key performance indicators. Now, I cannot even tell you the last time I sent some technical report to somebody. Nobody cares, okay? They care about one thing. Are they growing year over year? So that's the expectations that you're going to set. So another column that I'm going to add here is when you're closing the deal, you're going to set a couple of expectations, okay? When you're asking for the business, you're going to focus on these things here, which are the ones I just mentioned. The ad budget, you're going to recommend, all right? You're not going to give them all these options. You're just going to recommend it. Why? Because you're trying to recommend what's going to work. So to get concrete, let's say that ad budget was $3,000 per month, okay? The website, you need this because they're going to be in a contract. If I'm going to charge this business, let's say $1,500 a month, and they're going to cancel the second month with me, I'm sorry, you don't get to keep the website. You're not going to keep a website. You're not going to keep photos. You're not going to keep videos. You're not going to keep all this advanced shit that I did for you in 2 months and cancel. That's just not going to happen. I'm going to deliver so much stuff for you up front. I need you to pay the 12 months. So that's why you want to get the website. You want to get them into that retainer agreement, okay? So that's what's going to be critical for there. Photos and videos, guys, this is just non-negotiable. EEG machines, just talk about the science there. When we look at a picture of a person versus when we look at text, typically people have higher responses to pictures of people, and it works really well. And then for this one, very simple. We can't rely on SEO. Absolutely not. You cannot expect people to find you randomly and wait for people to search for you. That's an unrealistic way to grow 15%. You can't wait for your customers to send you recommendations. We have to actively advertise to get them, okay? We're going to talk a lot about that in the process here. And then regular meetings and KPI, there is one metric you need to know about, and that is year over year growth. Very freaking simple, okay? I'm going to show you an example of the only thing we talk to our customers about, which is that year over year growth. So I'm going to show you a little chart that we created today that showcased a little bit about this, okay? So this was the chart. I'm not going to pull up the client's name for confidentiality, but I'm just going to drag and drop this directly inside of here. This is the only conversation we will have with customers on a monthly basis, all right? This shows me year over year growth. Now, if I'm looking at this data, right, and I know at, let's say, December, which is probably down here, they're growing this month, they're growing this month. By the end of the year, they're going to have an average of how much they've grown on a monthly basis. And let's say that average comes out to be 15%. If I can go back to this data and I can say, hey, you actually grew 15%. Actually, you grew 18%. Our new contract is going to be for you to grow even more. Is that something you're interested in? Or do you want to stay growing 15%, etc.? So understanding their year over year growth is going to allow you to go back to their goals every single freaking conversation. Stop telling them about traffic. Stop telling them about clicks. Stop telling them about cost per click. Stop telling them about rankings. That's for your internal team to talk about. That's for your internal team to obsess over. You are the data nerd. You behind the camera need to communicate with the customer that the only thing you freaking care about is year over year growth, okay? And reason that's important is because you'll see we're a little slow here, okay? But in these months, we start getting a little bit busier. So seasonality has a lot to do with the business's year over year growth. So anytime we talk to a customer, this is what we're talking about. I'm going to show you another example, okay? This is another example of this exact thing that's happening today. And it doesn't need to be this insane thing, guys. You're really overcomplicating this. So here's another good example of this. Literally, I'm going to show you my meeting with a customer today. This was the meeting. All right. This is what we reviewed. That's it. All we reviewed was how did we do in October versus October 25. Now, in this October, they were spending X and X. In this case, this is how much they're actually spending on Google Ads, and then Meta is something completely different. However, in this October, they got more. We increased the ad budget. We increased the retainer. When December comes around and they want to grow even more, hopefully, and we know it's at risk for them, and we know what they have to lose, because we're not going to work with people that have nothing to lose, because I have things to lose. I care about my business way too much to work with people that don't care at all. And so that's not to come from an egotistical standpoint, by the way, guys. That's just to tell you that you're trying to get customers that match your energy. And hopefully you have good energy. Hopefully you're not just this standby guy that just gets pushed around all day and doesn't care about anything. In fact, that's called minimizing. And it's a key sign of depression. So if you don't stand for anything, if you don't care for anything, you're going to have to really pay attention to that. So this is the topic of conversation that I'm having with my customers. Now, guys, look, there's going to be months where we just eat shit. That happens. There's everything normal about that. But what you're looking for is that growth on a yearly basis. So I'm making this a key topic of conversation when I'm talking to our customers. I hope that's making sense. So when you're doing that, you're really going to focus on the delegation and the onboarding. So at that point, ideally, the contract is signed. The customer has not engaged in services until they have completed a DocuSign that the team can review. So you're not going to get a bunch of questions of what that team signed or what that client signed up for. Oftentimes, people will ask, did they sign up? When do we start working with them? What did they sign up for? You're going to want to kill yourself as an agency owner. That's just what's going to happen if you don't do this. Some of you might get away with it really well, and you might be very founder dependent. But if you want to scale, this is a key part of the system. That contract being signed is almost like your big confetti moment, okay? That is the moment where you can pop champagne. That is the moment when there is an actual, you can do money in the bank. Ideally, they're putting a credit card on file. You want to have a reason for them to actually engage with you. So when they sign the contract, that is when you get to do this, right? When you get to sign confetti, or you get to actually pop some confetti. Exciting moment there. From there, you want to introduce the team they're going to be working with. In this case, if you could have the team in the sales process. Now, as you get busier, this is going to be very hard for you to do. But the sooner you can make an introduction and talk about the roles between people, the more likely you're going to have success. I'm going to show you what's worked with me very freaking well. Here's what works best for me, okay? This is the client, let's say, and then I have two people on the account. Typically, I'll have a project manager, and this will be the person that communicates with the account more, and then I will have a designer, okay? This is the person that will be responsible for making sure the website's updated, making website changes, etc. In 2026, I want to be very clear with you. There is no SEO on this account. And I know to some of you that might sound absolutely ridiculous, but in 2026, and I'm going to double down on this, there's going to be no SEO, no ads person. There's going to be just these two critical components, the project manager and the designer. These two people can manage everything that account is going to need. And generally speaking, what I'll do is I'll put these projects into a group text. I'll have a Slack group about the client, etc. And the client can expect to hear from a team of people. In our case, we use something called Team Magenta. That's the email address that clients can email that gets access to our full team. So I'll set up something that looks like this, and then basically that'll go to my entire team, which will allow them to communicate with our team directly, or the team that's managing the projects. So if a client emails that email or calls our phone, we can get back to them relatively quickly. So this is the two-pronged approach of working with a client. Now, generally speaking, guys, when the police come to your door, and hopefully that's not happening to you, typically they're going to send two people. I found that two people on one project has been the most successful thing on the planet. In fact, there's been a lot of research around two-people teams, small teams of two people that have been very successful. So that's what I'll do when it comes to that, is introducing the team early on. If you don't do this early on, you're going to find it's going to be really difficult for you to delegate that stuff. So I really recommend doing it early on. And that comes with just explaining what the role is in the process. For the project manager, their role is to communicate this information with the customer ongoing. Oh, sorry, I wasn't sharing my screen. The project manager is communicating this. The designer is communicating the design work that's happening on the website. So the designer is communicating this stuff that's happening, right? I've updated this. I've made this wireframe. I've done this design, etc. That's what's working really well for us right now. So the next thing you're going to want to do in the delegation and the actual onboarding process is you're going to want to do an in-person meeting for the onboarding to get access to everything that customer has. I have zero tolerance for telling customers to send me things digitally. I physically get their computer and just do the work with them in person. If you're going to get this customer, for the next 48 monthly payments, guys, do the work. Get their Meta access, get their Google access, get their Google Business Profile access, have a healthy onboarding meeting with the customer to get that information up front, because nothing's going to be worse than getting that information in the long term. The next thing I do is I get access to their customer database. This is going to be first name, last name, email. This is going to be phone, right? So these are going to be things that I'm going to need to create a retargeting list. When I get to the advertising portion of this, you're going to see that most of the targeting that we do on the internet for all of our ads have nothing to do with interest, have nothing to do with age, have nothing to do with anything like demographics, etc. I use that more so for the creative side of what we do for the customer. But for the ad targeting, a customer database will usually be enough for you to have a significant amount for you to run with. So I recommend getting that on an onboarding process as well. During this meeting could take 2 hours. And then I go through a strategy meeting with them. And typically I'll use, if you're doing this remote, you can use tools like Miro or Vibe, which is what I'm using. If you're doing this in person, you're typically doing something very similar. And what I'm doing during this meeting is I'm going to get their buy-in of what I'm actually going to do for them. So for example, I've shared with you guys a few case studies on my actual channel of us working with the gym. And this is typically what this strategy meeting will look like. So what I'm doing is I'm using SplashDash to come up with the sentiment of what our strategy is going to be. I'm setting some goals for them to get reviews. I'm confirming with them the population we're going to target. I'm confirming with them the data that we're going to be showing. I'm confirming with them the keyword possibilities and just getting yes or no's on a lot of these decisions. I'm confirming with them how we're going to actually be doing a lot of this targeting and showing them how we're actually going to make this work. And I'm getting their buy-in to really understand their key metrics. I found that when I do this, I have a lot more success than me just jumping into the work. So for me, this is actually happening in person. And as you can see, it's always a work in progress. So every meeting, I'm going through this visually with customers. When I show them the design, I'm showing them the before and the after. When I'm showing them the ads, I'm getting their feedback on which ones they like and which ones they don't like. This is all of the kind of work that I'm doing physically with the customer so that ultimately I can land on a strategy. Now, guys, I want to make this extremely clear. When I go back to here, during that strategy meeting, I'm setting expectations on my pricing ladder. Now, for those of you that may not know what this is, I'm going to make it very clear for you how this works. And I'm going to show you the money here. So let's say if I have a value ladder here, the first time a customer works with me is going to be 12 months, let's say. So this would be our first year contract. First time customer works with me. I'm thinking about my value ladder. Now, what does that mean? Well, let's say the first step was that deal. The second step is this deal. The third step is this deal. You want to think about what that value ladder is like, and you want to communicate this as early as possible with that customer. So for example, if I just started working with you behind the phone that's watching this, and I say phone because this is actually on my iPhone. Okay, so you're telling me that if this works and you grow 15%, next year we can increase the budget. They're always going to say yes. So I'm going to start with a small audience. If it's going to work well, we're going to expand that. Are you excited about that? And then they're going to say yes. So by the second year that comes around, I can show them data that looks like this on a month-over-month basis, and I can recall this information. When I get them to go to that second level, which is the second level of the value ladder, they're going to be excited about that. So year one, if I take their actual information here, let's say this is year one. Let's say this is $1,500 a month. Let's say that has a $18,500 contract value. Let's say that's an ads budget of $3,000 per month. Okay. Let's say this is phase one or whatever you want to call it. I recommend titling your packages something. So step one of the value ladder is this. That's what I'm selling every time I'm working with a customer. I'm never trying to skip the value ladder. I'm always trying to build value over time. This is how you guys get your biggest customers, by the way, guys. You start like this, okay? So I have my value ladder. This is step one, all right? Year one. Now, if the client's getting results, in this case, this is not year one, by the way. This is a very high advertising budget. But in this case, I just want to show you, if the numbers start to look like this, and you're having a very simple conversation here, did you grow year over year in February? What were your leads last February versus what were your leads this year, February? That's going to bring the client to the self-realization that you're actually doing something that's impacting their growth, right? Very, very critical. So as I do that, I'm going to move into step two. Now, step two might look something different. This might be $3,000 per month. This might be $36,000 contract value. This might be $9,000 advertising budget, right? The first one is they wanted to grow marginally. The second one is they want to grow even more. And then you're going to bring them to the third step of your value ladder. And depending on what you want to offer as services, that's completely up to you. But generally speaking, I'm all inclusive. The only thing that changes with our packages is the amount of money they spend on advertising. So at this point, you might be at $5,000 per month. In our case, our biggest package is $10,000. And you might be at $120,000 contract value, and they might be spending $25,000 on advertising budget, right? This is how you're going to scale. You're always going to start here. You're never going to start here unless you're at the point to where your agency is really reputable and you're ready to scale and you're getting those types of leads. And you can do year two, you can do year three. This is how you're going to get your biggest customer. A lot of agencies want their biggest customer, but they don't realize that they already have their biggest customer. It just hasn't manifested itself yet into this situation. I also want to make something very clear too. At this point, you can typically, if it's worked well, you can typically ask for a 2-year contract. When you get to this point, you can typically ask for a 3-year contract. But in your first phase, you might start off at 6 months or you might start off at 1 year. The reason for that is people genuinely don't trust you in the beginning. So you have to increase your value ladder over time like this with that customer. Now, every single thing that I'm doing here is delivering the same thing. Nothing is changing here in the deliverables. I want to make that very clear. The deliverables are as what I showed you above. And it all breaks down to this. It is this information that I showed you right here. I'm going to recommend a budget based on their population. I've made a ton of SplashDash videos about this. I'm going to use all this stuff. And really, all I'm accomplishing for that customer is I'm doing this exact process. I'm taking ads that look like this. Let's say multiple ads at once. I can make a ton of content about this, but I'm not going to do that for this live because I want to mostly talk about the actual funnel. I'm taking those ads and I'm running them to a landing page. All right. That landing page is conversion optimized based on scientific advertising. Okay. That's conversion focused. If you just take the time to read this, I promise you, you're going to get your customers so many results, they're not going to know what to do with. If you want these types of metrics, if you want these kinds of numbers on an ongoing basis with your customer, you really need to get down to the scientific level. This is the book that I recommend for that. Guys, stop being so damn lazy and go read a damn book. It's not that thick. It's really freaking small. And if you're doing this for clients, look, I've read it so much the freaking binding is coming out. That's how much I'm reading this shit, guys. And then you can take a look. I'm highlighting shit and I'm going back and I'm just making sure that I understand I'm on my game. Because when this book came out, the guy was advertising, it was in the 20s. He couldn't waste money. They were in the depression. So then what I'm doing is I'm sending that to a landing page. And then from there, I'm checking to see how many contacts that business is getting. And I'm basing that year over year for the month, how many contacts they got. Very simple. Now let's take a look at the funnel in a real example. I just explained to you what that funnel looks like. We have, in this case, our ads, right? You can see at this step, we have a very clear goal when we start doing this. Keep in mind, the customer that I'm showing you is at this level. So I'm trying to show you the most advanced part in this funnel that I'm showing you. So I'm going to show you this. At this stage, I have a clear goal. All right. Let me just pull this up here. I have a clear goal, and that's to beat last November. That's my goal, right? Because as I showed you, we already beat last October. Now I know what to beat in November. That's the goal. That's the topic of conversation that I have. So the way that I'm going to do that is I'm going to create a great offer for the business. In this case, it is storage, right? And then the creative is going to be what I'm going to show you. The creative is going to have all of the scientific advertising principles. And all of that is going to go to a landing page that has a healthy budget. The value of working with clients at the higher value ladder, you can basically tell them for every X amount they spend, they're going to get Y. So we're already at that level. At this point, I'm going to figure out what that budget's going to be. In this case, it's $35,000 per month. All right. Didn't start that way, guys. Doesn't start that way. You don't just start managing $35,000 of somebody's money by just twiddling your thumbs and asking for it. I mean, technically it is how you do it if you're very confident, but you do a value ladder. You already have your biggest customer. You just haven't realized it yet. So from there, the landing page. So let's look at the creative. So this is what we're running, right? Granted, there's Google Ads too. We're going to run creative that looks like this to try to get the most conversion that we can. So the creative is a straightforward graphic showing human beings, branding the creative, giving them a clear offer, showing the customer that we're close to them. Proximity is really important here. And we're going to drive that traffic directly to the website. Now, we're not going to show just one creative. We're going to show significant amounts of creative. Back to the book. If you want to increase your frequency, if you want to increase your ad fatigue or lower your ad fatigue, if you want to get results, you've got to show people creative often. In fact, most people disengage after seeing something 3 times. So if you keep seeing me making YouTube videos with the same thumbnails over and over and over again, eventually you're going to disengage. So at this point, what I like to do is I like to make different creatives with the same offer. You guys see how all of the ads, all of the creative are using different designs, but they just have a different offer. Or I'm sorry, all of the same offer, they just have a different design. So when I go here and I actually look at this ad, when I click through, it's going to go to the landing page. Important technical small note here that the landing page that it's going on is just directly to the client's website, right? Very important. We don't use third-party landing pages. We don't mess around with these unbounces and these click funnels and these lead pages and these go high levels. We don't do that unless you're putting the client's website directly on that domain, which I don't recommend doing that. However, we use content management system called Duda, and it works really well. And at this point, I get the customer to fill out a form to convert, and we track that on a year-over-year basis, and they tell me how many people they booked versus last year. I am looking at leads, yes, but the most important metric I'm looking at is booking. So at that point, I can figure out on a year-over-year basis if this is going to work for them. So if you're looking at all this information, I highly encourage you to go back to this video so you can see my entire sales process. For the data part, I'm using different tools like SplashDash, which is a tool that I made, but I'm mainly really relying on what I'm discovering from the customer in the initial part. So with that being said, guys, I've covered a lot here. I hope you've enjoyed it. I'll see you in the next video.